Oh, good. We
Hey.
didn't get that recording yet.
Yeah, I just turned it on. Thanks
Is
for
it-
reminding me.
Is it climate change?
What? No, no, this is actually just climate regular in Michigan. I
Oh,
live in
okay.
Michigan, and
Okay.
this is just like, whatever.
We
It's
had
snowing.
snow in Massachusetts on Sunday. It
Yeah.
didn't stick, but it was
Cold.
really cold.
Yeah, we've had lows around freezing most nights. So that's good it's good for maple syrup production. So I can't complain there because I love, love, love maple syrup.
Mm. Okay, we have, oh, there's Greg. Greg is on. Hi, Gregory, how are you? Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Yes, yes, Deirdre.
Yes,
Deirdre.
hi, good to see you. Thank
Yes,
you.
it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes. Jacqueline Lawrence, how are you? Are you at home, Deirdre, or just at work?
I'm actually at my mother-in-law's. She actually lives across the street from where I work. So I
Oh,
just
very good.
ran over here during lunch. But thank you.
Okay,
Good to
Good.
see you.
good. Good. Well, it's 12:01. Shall we begin?
Let's go.
Let's go, is right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the April 20th, 2022 meeting for the Society of Virgin Islands Historians. Welcome, everybody. Everybody has gotten the Secretary's report. Is that right?
Yes,
Everybody has the Secretary's report.
I have it.
Are there-
Yeah.
Are there any additions, deletions? Any discussion?
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I just unmuted myself, so now I think you can see and hear me. Good
Oh,
afternoon.
good, good. Welcome, Greg. All right. Are there any additions and deletions to the secretarial's report? No, if not, could I have an amendment to accept? Amendment to accept the secretary's report?
Motion to accept.
Who was there that day? I took the minutes for Susan. Nobody was there. All right.
There.
All right. Is somebody just get on that was probably there?
I'll second.
All right, second, Julie. Okay, fine. All right, the next thing is the treasurer's report, and I am the treasurer at the time. I can tell you that we have $5,523.84 in the bank. We have 38 members to the organization. This is a lot of members for, since a long time, so thank you very much. And I'd like to say hello to Aletha, who is our vice president. Aletha, hi.
She's muted.
She's muted. All right. The next thing is that we have heard of the passing of Eugene Doc Peterson. And as you can remember, a couple of months ago, with Christopher Friesbo, who talked about Calypso songs and gave us a couple of samples of Calypso songs. Eugene Peterson was there as the respondent and gave some remarks about the songs, and he passed. Sadly, he passed just 2 weeks ago. So Christopher wrote something, and I'm just going to read it. It says, Doc Peterson, as I knew him, was such a kind, intelligent, warm person. And it is strange to think that he's gone, especially seeing as how we at my recent presentation, where he seemed just like I remember from meeting him in St. Croix a few years ago. I am really sorry for his family and no doubt many, many friends, and for St. Croix. So I thought that was an excellent little memorial to Doc Peterson. So I included it in our meeting. All right, the other news note is that David Hayes, that we hear, is in the hospital from in the States somewhere. So if anybody knows any information, could you please let us know? All right. Is there any discussion about any old business? Any previous matter? Okay, Shalana Brown, hello, greetings. Ms. Hurd, greetings. Can you hear us? All right.
Joseph is muted.
Oh, Joseph is muted. Shalana Brown, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you. Yes. All right, shall we go into our presentation today? All right, we will. For our presentation, your illustrious president, Elizabeth Rezende, Betsy Rezende, has written 3 papers on political and civil aspects of the first generation of Virgin Islanders migration to Harlem, New York. She has created 2 small SVIH annual meetings featuring papers on care of Casper Holstein. And he has presented it at the Virgin Islands Diaspora at the Caribbean Genealogical Meeting at Laverty Stout College in Tortola. Today's presentation is funded through a community foundation of the Virgin Islands grant. Greg Motta is one of our respondents. He grew up on St. Thomas and spent his career working at the National Archives and the Northern Virginia Community College. Pardon me? Northern Virginia Community College, is that right? Isn't that the same college that the First Lady teaches English at?
That's right.
Yes, that's right. He graduated from the University of Maryland, where he wrote his PhD dissertation about the first 30 years of American rule in the Virgin Islands. He is now retired and lives with his wife, Nancy, in Hudson, Massachusetts. Amelia Flood, who is our respondent, is a student of American Studies, and she is doing her dissertation at St. Louis College, or St. Louis University at St. Louis, Missouri. She is also working at Washington University in one of their departments, their IT departments there. She has written a professional article. And Amelia, could you tell us the name of the article and the journal in which it appeared?
Certainly, it is Neither Citizen Nor Alien. Let me make sure I get the correct title, because the subtitle on it. It's
Alien.
Yeah, Neither Citizen Nor Alien: Migration, Territoriality, and Malfunctioning Empire in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That was published in the Journal of Transnational American Studies in 2020.
Transnational American Studies. Here on St. Croix, I don't think anybody has seen a journal such as that, but hopefully we will.
But it is available completely free online.
Yes.
So it's easy access relatively.
Yes. Yes. All right. All right. So we will begin, and I have already my name, and I am president of this illustrious organization. And as I have said, this is the 3rd in a series of presentations on Casper Holstein. He is a native of the Virgin Islands. He was a migrant to Manhattan, to Harlem, and he had spent his life working to make reforms for the Virgin Islanders, both in the States and at home here in the islands. So the title of my paper is Casper Holstein, The Pivotal Years, Organization and Activists. And I had invited Ronald Hewitt to come, because Ronald Hewitt had given us a paper on Casper Holstein's formative life. And Carl Christensen had traced his own life and that of Casper Holstein's, which were parallel pathways of immigration to New York City. And Chester Williams, who explained the importance of various Caribbean organizations to help the migrants. And I reported on the beginnings of Virgin Islands Congressional Council, VICC. We would like to welcome the rest of the people who have just joined us and to give you a minute just to get your audio going. Inga, how are you? Helene Smollett, Susan Lugo. All right, everybody is connected, with the audio.
Everybody has people who have not unmuted themselves need to unmute themselves. Celeste, Judith.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Suzera. All right, the people who have not unmuted themselves, will they unmute themselves? Unmute themselves. All right. Okay. All right, so we will start. The introduction. Casper Holstein's middle years, 1922 to 1927, he became an influential columnist, a tireless organizer, and a vocal activist against the struggles for civic and political reforms in the Virgin Islands. His first task, I need to share my screen. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay. Everybody sees the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, all right, good. His first task was to assimilate the many Virgin Island societies and organizations in New York City. The purpose for the united group was to create a front to focus on political and civil reforms for the people of the Virgin Islands. These allied societies devised as their new mandate the upholding of the Virgin Islanders' individual civil rights, providing justice through the court system, and creating equality in all phases of government. For 14 years of naval administration, 1917 to 1931, naval officers displayed indifference to the people of the islands by continuing to enforce the Danish Code of 1906 as the law of the land because of the United States' abrupt participation in World War I. Thus, an unusual relationship between the people and the naval officers was developed because of these tenuous circumstances. The treaty did not confer American citizenship upon the people. It gave the inhabitants limited rights and left the responsibility for the mode and enforcement of government strictly to the US Navy. In New York, Casper Holstein heard of reported experiences of the US Marines' abuses and treatment of the people of the island and the lack of social justice, and the people were denied. Virgin Islanders vocally showed their outrage. Holstein was one who had started a barrage of letter writing and some correspondence directly to the US president. He engaged in public speaking events, writing newspaper articles, and networking with representatives in the United States and the House to capture the public attention, both in the islands and in Washington. This presentation follows the struggle for civil rights, justice, racial consciousness for the people of the islands. Casper Holstein, as president of the VICC of New York, led a group of steadfast activists, both in the city and in the islands, to fight for US citizenship. Presentation points. Holstein's mission: the fight for civil and political rights for Virgin Islanders at home and in the States. In the Virgin Islands, with a lack of political and civil rights, Congress considered VIers incapable of civil rights or civil rule. The ruling class, the colonial council, and the naval officers were indifferent to the abilities of the VIers. Protesters in the islands, the editors, evangelical ministers, lawyers, and labor leaders were considered agitators. In New York and stateside, with a lack of political and civil rights for immigrants, Virgin Islanders were considered foreigners. Reasons for migration for both immigrants and migrants from the southern states were for better jobs, higher wages, greater educational prospects, higher skilled employment. Presentation point 2. For VI immigrants, joining organizations such as benevolent, social, occupational, labor unions, political were important for the assimilation to stateside life. Holstein formed the Virgin Islands Congressional Council to fight for political and civil rights for Virgin Islanders. Holstein engineered the change in political process during the 1921 and 1927 with the assistance of Virgin Islanders. And you may know some of these names: Rothschild Francis, D. Hamilton Jackson, Anselmo Jackson, Ashley Totten, Leander Hassel Holder, Halver Berg. David is right here, David Berg's relative, his great-grandfather, D. Hamilton Jackson, Redalia Matthews, Elizabeth Hendrickson, Frank Crosswaith, and others in New York and in the islands. Casper Holstein was nominated for the 1926 Harmon Foundation Award for African Americans in the category of race relations. U.S. citizenship finally was conferred on Virgin Islanders in the islands in 1927 and in the States in 1931. Harlem, 1890 to 1920s, was a densely populated community in New York City. By 1920, nearly 12,000 Danish West Indians / Virgin Islanders resided there, while the population of St. Croix had declined to 20,000 inhabitants. In Harlem, Caucasians retained the commercial positions as merchants and service providers to the two newly arrived groups, the African Caribbeans and the Southern African American migrants. African Caribbean and migrant men from the southern states, no matter how educated, were left to fill positions as porters, doormen, and elevator operators. Gradually, they ascended positions as skilled workers and tradesmen. For women, jobs such as domestics, nannies, household help, and seamstresses were entry-level positions. With time in the city, they could seek higher positions as typists, clerks, and dress finishers. In the caption here, African Americans were prevented from owning large commercial properties and businesses in their own neighborhoods. They were left to operate beauty parlors, small vacant shops, and barber shops, small variety shops. Casper Holstein arrived in the city in 1885 at the age of 9 with his mother, Emily Eliza Holstein. He was born in the Free Gut of Christiansted of parents who were members of the free colored families and of the prominent free colored families. Generations of his family lived at 47 Hill Street, Christiansted, in the house owned by the Petersons. And you may know that the Petersons were the first cousins of Anna Hegard. The head of the household, the male head of the household, had owned Holstein's great-grandmother, Nancy, originally from Africa. African-American soldiers who had served in the First World War were expected to land suitable occupations. Except when they got out, there were no such positions. Casper Holstein learned this, and after his years in the Navy, he said, quote, "I'm not going downtown to swing 'em up." All in his position as porter at Wall Street office, He took careful note of the procedures and proceedings used by the stock traders. In Harlem, he devised his own numbers game by which players would put down pennies on a number in hopes that the number played would be announced in the racetracks. Ashley Totten. It had been 9 years since Holstein had visited the islands. He had traveled in 1918, but was eager to travel in 1919. Instead, he had to have Ashley Totten and Elizabeth Hendricks to come on a fact-finding tour. And both of these individuals were part of the Virgin Islands Congressional Council from the, and as you all know, Ashley Totten was one of the porters at the Sleeping Porters Union, and he was one of the organizers and recruiters for the union as well. Nearly everyone who visited the island saw plainly that the Virgin Islands suffered a wide range of social and economic problems. The majority of the inhabitants in town were living in poorly maintained barracks yard, and those in the country were living in row houses built in the rural areas for former enslaved laborers. Holstein wrote monthly for Marcus Garvey's Negro World. His articles always landed on page 2 with a very lengthy headline and many columns. He was in 1925 to write an informational article on the Virgin Islands in the upscale magazine Opportunity, a publication of the National Urban League. He started in an even temper and calmly set down the points to describe the US government's actions for stripping economic profits from the islands. The US government's Prohibition Act, the 18th Amendment, drastically downsided economics in the sales of alcohol and in shipping revenue. In the same year, Holstein was approached by the Opportunity editors to supply the money for the prizes of the newly recognized artists and novelists, younger African Americans. With his donations, Holstein became one of the founders of the Harlem Renaissance. And in here, it says the Holstein Prizes. And he says, having been all my life a firm and enthusiastic believer in the creative genius of the Black race, to which I humbly belong, Opportunity's prize contest is an artistic expression among Negroes that has begun, and to get the breathless interest is a breathless interest to me. So he wrote a very flowery acceptance of why he was contributing to this endeavor, this contest endeavor. Here is a picture of 1848 to 1948. This is a little bit dated, but it shows the coordinating committee of the American Virgin Islands Societies. This was taken in 1948, but the joining of the committees together happened in the 1920s. And Samuel Jackson and Casper Holstein started the Virgin Islands Congressional Council, VICC, in 1921. Holstein became president in 1923 to 1932. He united the Virgin Islands organizations together. The organization created a united front for petitioning Congress and the President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge, to create reforms in the political administration of the islands. There were 3 illegal infractions against the natives of St. Thomas, which inflamed relations between the inhabitants and the naval administration in 1923. First, in a newspaper libel case against Rothschild Francis, appointed district court judge of St. Thomas, George Washington Williams, refused Francis a trial by jury, citing that the US Constitution was not applicable in this case or in these islands. 2, The naval governor was determined to promote Judge George Washington Williams as a bigger district court judge for the entire Virgin Islands, while Williams had held several conflicting positions in government. 3, the Quebec lines refused to issue Leander Hasselholder a return ticket to New York, as she was neither alien nor citizen. Here is a picture from McClure's. A special article on economics in the Virgin Islands appeared in McClure's magazine in 1919, illustrated with a photo of Rothschild Francis and a group of radicals, and that's in quotes, who said that their movement, quote, wanted home rule, quote, meaning black rule in the islands, quote. Here is a picture of Leander Hasselholder, St. Tomian, a resident of New York since 1908. She was refused a return trip to New York because of the Reed Act of 1929 had been passed, limiting certain groups of people from migrating to the United States. Leander Hasselholder was in the Virgin Islands on work for Casper Holstein. She was a member and an officer of the VICCC, and she was sent there during the summer months during this time to serve as a recruiter for the newly formed division of the organization in St. Thomas. And Ashley Holder was sent to Frederiksted for the Frederiksted group. Besides recruiting members, organizing lectures and activities, and gathering signatures on petitions, Holder provided the VICC and the American Civil Liberties Union, the ALCU, with clippings from the Herald and the Emancipator for their communications department. Her citizenship status became a court case when Holstein asked the president of the American Civil Liberties Union to write to the Congress and provide an unofficial representative to convince US senators of the VI plight. This is a chart. Bills introduced to the US Congress 1924 to 1925. Politics intensifies, Senate and House bills submitted. Between the years 1924 and 1926, 8 legislative bills, and some of these are combined, 8 legislative bills were submitted before US Congress. The bills were similar in content to one another. They have been tabulated by Isaac Dukin in his article in 1979. Among the 8 petitions, the most pressing reforms cited by those who participated were conferring citizenship on the entire population, the right of adult suffrage, the inclusion of a Bill of Rights, and the curtailing of the interference between the different branches of government in the Virgin Islands. So those are the demands. They're pretty much the same in each one of the petitions. Over here to the left is the people that these were introduced by. In 5 cases, senators and other states were sympathetic to the cause. And the lobbyists that ACLU and Casper Holstein had hired were the ones who got these people on board to vote and to bring this bill up before the Congress. Felix Davila is a delegate to Puerto Rico, helped introduce bills. Representative Al Bacon, Edgar Cayce, and Edgar and Frank B. Willis. All right. So the bill also was helped by, and is listed here, is D. Hamilton Jackson and Halvard Berg were also in introducing these bills before Congress. These are the people who testified for the bills. And they were always in the beginning naval officers, and you will see here the naval officers are Commodore Raymond Stone, Major General Frank McIntyre, Buchanan, Captain Alan Buchanan, who sat as testifiers. Then there were also the governors of the Virgin Islands, the appointed naval governors. Governor Sumner Cattell sat this year, and on this year here, Governor Martin Trench sat on the panel. Then there were the people from the Virgin Islands. D. Hamilton Jackson sat on one panel. And also down here, Halvard Berg, Formal Anderson, Douglas Armstrong, D.C. Canegata, Robert Merwin, all traveled up to the States, being funded by Casper Holstein to provide testimony in front of the bill. This is David's great-grandfather, Halvard Berg, whose tuition Holstein had paid for an engineering degree. He served as VI's unofficial representative, a pre-delegate to Congress, and through his walks to the halls of Congress, convincing the legislator to push through the reforms needed in the Virgin Islands, which he and others had written in order to get citizenship, to get a change of the naval administration for a civil one, and to allow every male adult voting rights. Here is Casper Holstein. This is a 1936 picture of him. And this is, I want to thank Amelia Flood for this picture. In congressional hearings on the bills, Casper Holstein was never a presenter, never a testifier. Casper Holstein was simply a listener from the gallery of the House of Representatives or of Congress. He had paid lobbyists to represent the VI side of the islands. Calvin Coolidge signed the Johnson-Reed Bill of 1924, established quotas to restrict Virgin Islanders' travel to the States and back again. And this is under which Leander Hassel Holder was caught and remained in the Virgin Islands an additional 2 months before ACLU and the VICC were able to get it unraveled and to get people back to where they belong. Later, Calvin Coolidge signed the Citizenship Bill, the 1927 Citizenship Bill for Virgin Islanders. Its passage was announced by the incoming 7th Naval Governor, which the president had appointed. In the category of race relations, Casper Holstein was nominated for the Harmon Foundation Award by the editors of the Opportunity magazine. This was by one of the most influential philanthropic organizations supporting African-American achievement. And also Holstein was honored by the Allied Virgin Islands Societies, but was too ill to accept the acknowledgement. Conclusions. As the inspirational force behind the movement, Casper Holstein had utilized the collective resources of the organizations to provide man, woman power, and leadership for greater political reform. The lobbying efforts of paid representatives, ACLU personnel, and Democratic senators in pushing bills onto the floor of Congress. And the Virgin Islanders' steadfast knowledge that the American democracy would prevail. It took a little more than 10 years to the day for United States citizenship to be conferred on Virgin Islands residents. A lot of work on behalf of many people was used to get that one reform through Congress. Thank you. And now I have Amelia Flood and Gregory Gregory Motta. How do we want to do this? Will they automatically come up? Do I have to unshare my screen? I have to unshare my screen. And then they will automatically come up?
It would help if you were to pin them so that we can see the three of you.
I don't know if I can do that. It would help if I would do what?
It helps if you pin the discussants. First and foremost, excellent presentation, Dr. Rezende, and then the pinning portion makes it a little easier for us to see the three of you.
Okay. Here's Amelia here. What do I do? Do I click on her? I don't understand what
Yes.
you.
No,
click
that's what
on
I'm
her.
saying, yes.
There she is.
Yeah,
Okay.
you see it. Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. Now, Gregory.
Yeah, I can talk. And can you hear me?
That's why I want to see you. There
Can
you
see me?
are.
Okay.
Yes, we see him when he speaks, yes.
We see him when he speaks. There. Okay. So do I have to click them each time?
Oh. You'll
No, I
see
think it'll work when we speak.
Okay. It says remove pin. All right, Gregory, you're on simply because your face is on the screen first.
Okay.
Okay.
Betsy, thank you very much for that presentation. I enjoyed it. It's always good to keep that early struggle, in the public limelight, so it's not forgotten. Because since I don't live in the VI anymore, I'm not quite sure where the current consciousness is on about those first few years. Let's see. I have a quick personal comment and some questions and another comment, I guess. First of all, when you mentioned that Casper Holstein lived on Hill Street, that's where my grandparents lived. So that's just a minor personal connection there. A question, I'm not sure if you mentioned if you knew the number of Virgin Islanders who were living in Harlem at the time. Did you mention that?
I did the early, it was 12,000. That was before 1920.
How many?
That's an early figure.
But what's the figure?
12,000.
12,000. I'm sorry, I keep missing that. That's a lot of people. Yeah, that's a lot of people compared to overall population. Okay, I missed it when you said it, and I thought you did, but I wasn't sure. Okay, great, thank you. And looking at the list, when you threw up the list, the table of the speakers for in Congress to discuss the citizenship.
Yes.
You mentioned people like Fulmer Anderson.
Yes.
And, there were a couple of others.
DC Canagator, Robert
DC Canada,
Merwin.
yeah, DC Canada. Okay, that all reminded me that going on at that time was the political struggle in St. Croix, where Jackson, Canagata, probably several others were trying to trying to extend the local right to vote and to make the colonial council more democratic.
Right.
And in that process, the governor actually dissolved the colonial council.
Yes, he did.
So when the discussions in the US Congress were going on, that struggle in St. Croix was also going in the background and affecting, and that's why those people were there speaking in the US Congress in light of that particular struggle.
Yes, that's an important point.
So just to keep that in mind, that the local stuff is going on and affecting what's going on at the national level.
Okay.
And lastly, it would be interesting for somebody to explore, or different people to explore, because I think it's a big topic, the effect that Virgin Islanders had on the transfer. I know that the St. Croix Labor Union conducted a poll, I don't know how scientific it was, that showed that Cruisians were definitely in favor of the transfer, the majority anyway. And I think we can probably say confidently that most Virgin Islanders were in favor of the transfer. And the fact that Jackson went to Denmark in 1915. Can you all hear me? Because my picture's frozen up.
Yes, we can hear you. We can see you.
Okay, good. Okay, so the fact that Jackson went to Denmark in 1915 leads me to think that the opinion of Virgin Islanders probably had some effect on the way that the Danes thought about the transfer. I don't know if Virgin Islanders had any sort of effect on the way the United States talked about the transfer, but that I think would be an area of research to look into. I think that's it for my points. Yeah, I think that's all I can say for now. But thanks again.
Okay, and when D. Hamilton Jackson went to Denmark in 1915, he was very pro-Denmark. And the people behind him, the middle class behind them, were very pro-Denmark. It was that 1916 commission report, and they came and they took of all kinds of people. They wrote up this report, and what happened? Nothing. And it was at that point when the report, 1916 commission report was published, that D. Hamilton Jackson changed. And his followers, his middle class followers changed, and they became supporters of the United States.
Right. So then the question would be whether that change of opinion had an effect on Denmark.
Well, that's another thing.
I know that's an area of research, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
One way to jump in. That's an excellent point. That's certainly been coming up in some of my research, because I actually look at the transfer and the kind of resounding impact it had through about 1936. And you do see, I've only just begun some research in the Danish paper archives, but you certainly see some awareness of that in the political discussions going on at the state level. Morris Francis Egan makes reference to these discussions, as well as cites some communiques going back and forth between Copenhagen and DC about the sentiment. Dr. Knud Hansen from St. Thomas, who was a member of the St. Thomas Colonial Council, also makes reference to some of these sensitivities being thought about in the metropoles of both the United States and Denmark. And I think you raise a good point about how did that sentiment change? How did it impact those state level discussions? Because you certainly see in the diplomatic communications a lot of sensitivities about how the transfer and the sale are being portrayed up to the treaty signing. There's a really great anecdote, I believe it's in Egan, about Danish women who could vote in the referendum on the sale for the first time, shouting at Parliament, "No, we won't sell," because of kind of paternalistic, maternalistic concern about the island's welfare under US rule. So it's really a fascinating area that you've touched on that needs to be explored, especially when we think about how local concerns at the Danish West Indian and Virgin Islands level speak back to the places that we typically see histories originating from. And I guess that'll kind of lead me in a little bit to some of my comments. And Betsy, a wonderful presentation. I have several notes to follow up on with you about where you found some things. But I wanted to make a point about some of the continuity of Mr. Holstein's struggles from the 1920s, even into the 1930s and beyond, in the sense that while citizenship was the ultimate goal, and really, as you see in his writings, it's the holy grail, citizenship and civil rights and Virgin Islanders becoming American. I think you also see some senses of disappointment, particularly as the 20s give way to the 1930s, because the citizenship that's conferred in 1927 and then to the diaspora in 1931 isn't full citizenship in the sense of mainland rights and civil rights. It's a limited sort of territorial citizenship that these people are enabled to exercise. And that's not what Casper Holstein and his allies and his activist circle have in mind. I mean, when you read his writings, it's very clear that he is interested in full citizenship, full civil rights. There's some speculation in the African-American press, particularly in the 1930s, as these things are coming to a head before 36, of the territory being put on the path of statehood, which would have been, frankly, for many in the mainland, in white society, unfathomable. This is absolutely not on the political agenda for most people in the United States at the time, outside of the African-American community. But it's something that is continuing discussion, because what they see is that the promise of full citizenship is never fulfilled, particularly in the transfer period. And that's where you see a lot of this fractious and roiling debate. You see it in the Leander Hassel-Holder situation, which I've read about, is you see the gaps that things like treaties and legislation, while they are worked out at the state level, don't account for ground level realities as people are living their lives. So it's really a fascinating period, Betsy, that you're concentrating on with this. Mr. Holstein has fascinated me for almost 8 years and will probably fascinate me my entire life. So I really appreciate being part of this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Does anyone from the audience have comments?
In 1933, Congress passed a Homestead Act, which enabled all Virgin Islanders appearing in the census records to apply for 10 acres per person in their household. Pretty much all Virgin Islanders rushed down and took the free land. This was 175 of the 250 plantations during the Danish period that had been abandoned virtually by corporations. Denmark had talked them into giving up the land, of course, for the Danish Sugar Company. But that's another story. The United States government has the land from 175 plantations and offers it up to the Virgin Islands people in a Homestead Act, which they certainly never did for African Americans in the mainland. And all Virgin Islanders really became landowners. Now, some of them didn't feel like farming that land, didn't want to farm the land, and sold it cheaply later. Some of it is still in the hands of the descendants. But I wonder which of these people that we've been talking about, Casper Holstein, any of them, were responsible for lobbying Congress for this Homestead Act, because it's fabulous.
I don't think it was them. I think it was the governor at the time, who was Kramer. Not Kramer.
Pearson.
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 That was one of Pearson's big thrusts.
Although, Betsy, it's interesting that bringing, I mean, at Stanford, that's a great point. And you're right, the 1933 Homestead Act is fascinating when we think about kind of disparities between how territories are administered and how groups in the mainland itself are treated with respect to those kinds of legislative actions. But so Pearson is Betsy's right, is the main lobbying push behind this, as well as some of the New Deal officials who come down from DC. But it's interesting that Holstein has a homesteading kind of scheme going on his own land prior to the passage of the 1933 Homestead Act. And I believe, Betsy, correct me, but I think he talks about this in some of the correspondence that Geerty cites in his book.
Yes.
And Holstein is generally credited, at least in the African-American press, with kind of pioneering the homesteading schemes that lead to the passage of the 1933 Act. I mean, I'll be curious. I mentioned offline that I'm going up to Paul Pearson's archives in 2 weeks, and the homesteading lobbying is actually one of the things I'm going to be looking for in those archives.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'd love to hear what you find.
Mm-hmm.
yes, the 3 estates that he owned were Jerusalem, Hope, Blessing. Those are the estates that are down by overlooking Hess Oil Refinery, overlooking the South Shore. He had brought from Puerto Rico purebred cattle, because his whole purpose was to provide milk to the school children so that they may be more nourished, have more nourishing meals. And that he was the one that had the vision of all of that. I don't know who the people who worked for him were. I don't know how long he kept the land. I believe that the land was foreclosed, as I see to the Recorder of Deeds, and that Joseph Alexander was the one that took it over, and then D. Chabert took the land over.
Betsy, you
Yes.
mentioned that Rothschild Francis had been charged with some type of a crime.
Yes, Rothschild Francis had been liable. Anybody who said anything against the early governors, the first naval governors, were arrested and put into jail. There was a trial, and as you see, he wanted a trial by jury, and he was not allowed. So he was put into jail for 30 days at that time. And he was put in several other times for things that he said in his newspaper, The Emancipator, and also on the soapbox in public as well. Rothschild Francis is another person that we all need to study more about. Jinzira, did you have a question? Hello?
How about Joseph Alexander? Was he anyway related to the founding of the Alexander Theater, or that the big family that has recently moved back to the Virgin Islands? That I think maybe he's a descendant from Joseph Alexander.
Joseph Alexander was a colonial council member, and he also was a merchant. He was a Syrian. His father was Syrian, and he was brought up here. He owned a lot of property. He was friends with D.C. Canegata, and he was friendly with Casper Holstein. So
Would be his grandfather, the man that's here now, that just purchased the castle and the Clovercrest and property in Frederickstead. He is the grandson.
Oh, the grandson, okay.
Of Joseph
Alexander.
Alexander.
Okay.
Yeah. Syrian, yes.
All right, does anyone have any other questions?
Oh, I don't have a question. I just had a statement. I just wanted to thank you for your the presentation and the work that you and Amelia has done on the Casper Holstein as a descendant of that line. As you mentioned in the beginning, Nancy of Africa was Casper Holstein's great grandmother, which is my fourth great grandmother. But what I also wanted to let you know was that I found an article in the Sanctuary Avis for 1935. It was, and I'm going to email it to you both. It was a poem from Maria Richards. I don't know if you remember her. She was or knew anything about her, but she wrote a poem to Casper Holstein. She dedicated to him, a son of St. Croix, a patriot, a true constant lover of the poor. And so I will compose by Marie Richards for the grateful people of Frederickstead. It was published February 18, 1935. I will email that to you to add to your repertoire, I guess.
Good. Shalana wants to read it.
Sure.
Yeah. Shalana. Yes. Are there any other questions?
Yes.
I think Celeste may have one.
I have a question and I have a couple of comments. Are we still dealing with one person, or are we dealing with the whole group questions? I don't want to kind of interfere if are we still dealing like each person
One
is still
person.
presenting? Because I got
Each-
knocked off a couple of times.
No, the audience is presenting.
Oh, so everybody's finished now, I can ask
Yes.
questions? Okay,
Yes.
okay. So first of all, my question was when you gave the information of who participated and was Casper Holstein and the individuals, there was a slide that you showed before that with people that was involved. And I guess I'm gonna actually probably call you afterwards because I saw that there was a George on there. I wanted to find out who that was. And my comment being that my grandmother who went up like in 1913 and my grandfather who went up prior to that, he owned property, a building that I later lived in Harlem in that time period. Okay, so him and several other owners, I don't have all of the names, but I know he was one of them, and I'm in the process of trying to find that out. My aunt, and then later on, he owned another building, but during that time frame that we're talking about, because he would have been about 25. He was born in like 1885. So he was about 25 when he owned the property, because prior to them, everybody kind of moving up into Harlem, they lived in what they call Hell's Kitchen. Many of them went up to Hell's Kitchen in the area of like 106 or like 62nd Street, 63rd Street. Many of them were there. And so I'm in the process of bringing up, I've got tons of that information that I'm digging up to present on. Yes.
I think I'll be done. Doc?
Huh? Okay. So, being totally, my focus has been in Harlem for quite a while and digging up a lot of stuff. So I would at one point probably present on that because they had I've got a lot of information, Harlem information as well. Specifically, I've been dealing with family who left these Virgin Islands and went to Harlem because I was born and raised in Harlem. Okay, that's it.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, any other questions?
Just a comment. A lot of the things you spoke about in terms of what Virgin Islanders did when they went to Harlem and went to New York in those very early years prior to the transfer and thereafter, speak directly to the experiences of my ancestors and what they did there. It's exactly what you said. They were porters, they were nannies, they were cooks, they were seamstresses, all of those things. And it also speaks to the other experiences that they had. I cannot tell you how many times I have looked at those relatives in my family that moved to New York during that period and experienced a sort of personal frustration when I would see they had to apply to become naturalized citizens and renounce allegiance to King Christian, the whatever, and here it is, 1925, King Christian doesn't know about Uncle Fritz. I've seen it so many times that it always ticks a little thing in my mind. And as a Crucian, I can also tell you that, it was not until late in my life, more or less close to adulthood, that I realized that, because it just wasn't spoken about, that the origin of our American citizenship is different than the origin of American citizenship for mainland Americans, and that we are only citizens in a very much more limited way than would otherwise be obvious to anyone. So this is not something, because I used to talk about it all the time. Well, what do you mean? Isn't this good? We're American citizens. Yeah, I know we can't vote for president and that's bad. But it was never clear to me that, hey, my American citizenship is derived from Congress and not from the Constitution. And that really is a big deal, because it does shift my thinking into understanding that this was part of America's last gasp of colonialism mindset, because I lived the indoctrination into my mind that I was just like any other American citizen. And it was never true. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Good comment.
And beautifully phrased, Julie. I mean,
thank you.
If I may, this is Dr. Chen. Let me see
Yes.
if I can get this video to cooperate. I got
Can you get the pin to move?
presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm just trying to make sure I'm in a spot that it doesn't go in and out. Is it calm now?
We can't see you.
Oh, you should
Yeah,
be
we
able to
can
see
see
me.
you. Yeah.
Seems so.
Yeah, you should be
Yeah.
able to see me. Yes. The point I just wanted to share is that there are a number of researchers that are revisiting the role of Virgin Islanders in the Harlem Renaissance and several movements that came out of the Harlem Renaissance. Very recently, there was a series of presentations coming out of the University of the West Indies around this whole Exonerate Marcus Garvey initiative that's, taking the globe and certain interests. And the names, all the names that you've mentioned have come up. And I thought it was very interesting that while the philanthropic component of Casper Holstein's work and value, a lot of times persons highlight quote unquote numbers running, gangsterism, that kind of stuff. And it's really critical that we keep pushing his organizational management, his investment piece that was also equally, if not more so important than that other side. And so I'm really glad that you shared that. Something that came across the table, and it's a website that's a people's historical journey to self-determination. And I just want to share this particular, because you mentioned the naval governor, Cattell, and he was really popularized by a particular quote. Virgin Islanders, a quiet and humble people, should not be allowed to rule themselves for 100 years. And when so, should be done under white rule. There are militants among them. I think, and that's 1922. I think it's really critical to add to what you've already shared and hopefully to encourage other researchers. And when I'm saying this very candidly, research, yes. Historical analysis, yes. However, it really needs to be parallel to the actual actions that are implemented, because some of these same issues are really affecting the Virgin Islands right now. And it would be wonderful in these different conversations around decolonization, around self-determination, to make sure that persons know that there's this history and there's examples of these great men and women that were contributory to questioning how the United States government addressed the native inhabitants of these spaces we now know as the Virgin Islands of the United States. Very, very wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. The wind, it was wind is behind your back. Any other questions? Anything else? I can't hear somebody.
Add a comment to that. Dr. Chen, Dr. Chenzera, can she hear me? Okay. Me, Celeste.
Sorry. Yes.
Oh, hi, Dr. Chenzera. Hi. I'd like
Greetings.
to be involved. I'd like to communicate with you because I like to be involved. My mother was actually a street speaker, and she was involved with the Marcus Garvey movement up until she died. And so I've got actual letters from him corresponding with my mother.
Excellent. I want to just add that, thank you for that, Sister Celeste. I want to just add that the Caribbean Studies Association, the conference next year is going to be here in St. Croix. And I'm really hoping that our society can actually share these types of papers, once that call comes, because I think it's very critical for the wider Caribbean community of researchers and scholars, go in a quieter place, I feel the wind, right? That they are aware of this serious type of research that's had and the type of historiography that needs to be inclusive in anything quote unquote Caribbean studies. I just wanted to share that as well. So yes, Sister Celeste, you can give me, we can connect after this meeting. But I think
Okay,
this is
thank
really wonderful, wonderful information.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
I'd like to say that it's fascinating what Deirdre Calley found, that there's already a colony immediately in New York by 1850. There are Crucians recently emancipated who made their way to New York City immediately, including John Gottlieb Badeau. And they were involved in the Underground Railroad as soon as they got there. I'd love to know how big that Crucian community was and how much everybody else was involved in it as well. When Badeau went up, Deirdre found that he stayed at the house of the Black man who had commanded the Black militia for the Danes. So therefore they had been supposedly opposed to each other. And yet Gottlieb goes to New York and stays at his house. And then he introduces Badeau to the leader of the Underground Railroad for the area. And Badeau ends up running a boarding house for the Underground Railroad in 1850. And I just think that's fascinating that Crucians were already in Hell's Kitchen in 1850.
Okay. That's another thing for us to continue on. All right, with that, I think we will close. I want to thank you all for your participation and your listening. I want to thank you for your questions and your insights. And to tell you that next month we have another important speaker, and you've seen it if you have seen the agenda, is Rashida Shaw, who is from the Wesleyan University in Connecticut, Middletown, Connecticut, and she will be talking about acting and performance in early enslaved African life in the States. And so she will be here. That will be in May's meeting. So if we have no other business to talk about, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Okay, and thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for all your good compliments, Susan Lugo and everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we pay our dues on PayPal?
Yes, Susan, ask Susan Beach.
Can you hear me, Stan?
I can.
Okay, I'll send you an email with the instructions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to
Yes.
see you.
Yes.
Good to
Okay.
see everybody.
Yes,
Thank you.
good to see everybody. Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.